My topic is as tradition in transition, a monastic and lay challenge in Zanskar amidst the globalization. As Zanskar is in the very top part of the Himalayan region, which is in the India's, we can say, the head of the India. So within that head of the India itself, in Ladakh, is a remote region and a valley which consists of more than 15 major monasteries are there still, and then within that 15 major monastery, there are a lot of lay followers who are depend on the monastery, and the monastery depend on the lay devotees for their sustainability. So what challenges it brings in this globalization, I would like to discuss in this paper. So while few Buddhists choose the monastic life and its presence in the integral part of their religious tradition in Zanskar, the Sangha represents the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path, striving for nirvana, which all Buddhists hope to achieve either in this life or another incarnation or the rebirth. Because reaching nirvana requires renouncing all worldly things and detaching oneself from the material concern, monks and nuns are required to beg instead of working, cannot marry or have a family, cannot participate in politics. They are therefore depend on their community, who supports them in their quest for enlightenment. Monasteries have a long had an interdependent relationship with their communities. They look to the community for food and money, and their monastery open their doors to lay people who need spiritual guidance. In fact, this interaction is an important part of the Buddhist traditions. In return for the community support, the monk and the nuns provide an ethical model for other Buddhists to live by and give lay people a spiritual goal to aspire. And the monastery not only plays an important role in the religious and spiritual life of the people of Ladakh, but also in their social function. Interaction with the lamas is important in every major Buddhist social functions of the region. On the occasion of like birth, marriage, death, monks are consulted and invited for the performing different kinds of rituals. And social organization of Ladakhi village is inadequately characterized by the constructing an account of the rules whereby people are separately, temporarily related to the ecology, their land holdings, inheritance, kinship. Such rule makes economic, indeed socio-biological sense in that they express the motivation of participate in the social process towards economic security, reproductivity, succession, and interpretation of this kind make us far in the directions of reductionist account of social structure in terms of certain prime movers. Yet when we begin to consider the complexity of relation between the laity and his monastery, such as approach does not begin to encompass the meaning and the laity themselves attribute to what they do. Monasteries populations consist of renouncants, who is one sense comprise a reproductivity surplus, whose failure to breed has an important valuable effect in terms of population control. To describe monastery and lay relation in this light would be produce an account unrecognizable by lay person themselves, and which will not explain why at any one time familiar continues to donate son to this institution. Since from my childhood I have been witnessing the Ladakhi society as crime-free, communities are healthy and strong, interdependent of the monastery, laymen, villagers having strong bond between each other. Through the chindak, which we called as the sponsorer or the one who sponsors the monastery as well as monks, they are called as chindaks. So we see the bond and the interdependent relationship between laity and the monastery, which used to prevail in Zanskar region of Ladakh. Before, almost like every monastery used to have lot of household or the chindak or the sponsorer for the each monastery, like different kind of monastery. Like for example, if I give like Rangdum and the Karsha monastery, there are two monastery, big monastery, which they have a household who are sponsored as chindak. We call it as more than 160 of the family householder used to support this monastery. And then similarly, Stongde, Lingchet, and so many other monasteries are there in my paper, where I've given a table of that kind of survey which I did in 2008. So the chindak, mostly the donor or the sponsor relationship, is known elsewhere in Tibet as well as in Ladakh. The terms refer to a common fund or a property linking laymen and monastic community through sponsorship. The relationship takes its origin in which Buddhist monasteries in India, which became supported as institution by the laity through the gift of goods or property through which income may be drawn. Such property would include whole village and their inhabitants. Ladakhi rulers endowed monastery with estate farmed by their families who then became material sponsor of the monastery. In Zanskar today, many of these link remains not in the sense that monastery owns particular village, but in that local population often farmlands belong to the monastery as well as its own and may receive loans in terms of money or monetary in kind of upon which it pays annual interest. These families also have an unspoken obligation to provide their monastery with sons who will be educated as monks or initiated as monks. In the Zanskar villages who support monasteries are known as collective as in Chindak, yet the term is also used for individual or individual who supply whatever is need for the particular annual festivals or some kind of other occasion for the monasteries and other ritual performance. Laity and monasteries are inextricably bound together in the cultural, economic and societal system of which the prime movers at the personal level is operations of the value system in which both villagers and monks play vital symbolic roles. Since the layman is unable to pursue enlightenment directly, the monk as a patron is obliged to find a means by which he can pursue it indirectly. The means must be flexible enough to serve the immediate need of the layman in different stages of the spiritual growth. However, it must not interfere with the pursuit of enlightenment on the part of the members of the monastery. Ideally, it would be serve both the lay and the monk needs at the same time. The monk as a such has no material resource to support special activity in the interest of individual laymen. Property given by the lay patron to the monastery as whole can be used only for monastery-oriented activities. In order to serve both lay and monks' need at the same time, the monastery had to find a way of accepting donation made by the lay patron for purpose not only immediately vital to the monastery, it did so by interpreting the relation of patron and client. By serving the lay patron through the medium of monk or monk acting as a client, the monastery was able to maintain its own prime role as patron, dispensing merit by its mere existence, at the same time use its ability for both lay and monk ends. For the performance of any religious act by a monk brought merit to him, hence to the monastery. The Chindak solved as these problems, it's unable the lay patrons to by means of obtaining merit from the localist monk and the form of merit sought depending on the buyer needs and on his funds. There was an inexhaustible stock of merit of which we to draw. The value system is constructed from a group of interrelated cultural assumptions. A merit can also be gained by rather easier route of sponsoring rituals of different kinds, some proprietors, some purifications, some invocations of the goods. The gift of a son by a family as a monk is thus a meritorious act, and to have a monk in the family maintain its status. And employment of the monks in the ritual is meritorious acts, and monks play a vital role in funeral, the ritual ensuring a safe passage to the best possible rebirth. The villager-monk relationship is thus once between those whose way of life necessarily entitles desire, hence a degree of non-meritorious actions and renouncements, who live a life of purification and learning as much on behalf of their fellow villagers as for themselves. There are such strong moral ties in both directions, which together comprise the rules of association within an ideology of merit system. The practical social action of the village into which the value translates involves personal ritualistic act involving recitations, offering, even prostration, etc. And the second is provision of resource for large ritualistic service by the monks in the monastery. Third, employment of the monks in the home or village generally for the performance of purification and other benevolence generating services. And the fourth, listening to the teachings of the high guru, lamas, or rinpoche, wherever such can be provided. And the fifth, support of the individual monks with an especially advanced practice of the renunciation, that is the yogin practice or retreat in the high caves or monasteries, whose practice blesses those who support them. And the last is the action towards limiting discord between the relatives and with the other villagers. In Zanskar, where the traditional Tibetan Buddhist paradigm remains relatively untouched by the outside influence, this view of life is intimately woven into the annual circle of subsistence. It interfuses with much older belief of animistic nature, so that the spirit of the place and the landscapes are always hovering in the background of the stage upon which the play of karma is acted out. Every household has a small chapel or a temple in which statues of Buddha or Bodhisattvas and the protected deities are near the latho of the clan household protected deity. There have been sometimes a library also, so that in many household scriptures at least be taught it not read with understanding. Merit is acquired through such activity. From time to time, monks are invited to these temples to perform their rituals and purifications of the household. In the internal world of the Zanskar is projected onto the landscape by constructions of monasteries, stupas, latho. The latho means the protected deity where the house is built, and places of prayer flags, monumental sites, and the very air of the valley is filled with the mindfulness of the religion and its ancient key in the goods of the soil, water, mountain. Much of the social life of the village is concerned with the act inspired by the religion in performance of individual act of piety, rituals, or in corporate organizations for ceremonial performance involving the culling down of monks, relatives from the monasteries above. And this essential point to emphasize here is that the monks are villagers. They are not a body of outsider imposed upon a subject peasantry, as some social analysts of communist persuasion have argued. In Zanskar, the social effect of the ideology of merit shared by the village renouncants alike can be clearly traced in the terms of economic consequences. So the village and the monastic relations are within the ideology of merit share system by the villagers, and the merit attributable to the laity and the monks in their respective roles within the system translate into an important component factor contributing to a family lineage stability, therefore to supervisorship of keen lines for agricultural exploitations, and the laity donates a son to the monastery at some economic cost, and then the merits so acquired translate into benefit which the monks' renunciation of the reproductivity life can confer on the family, and the pressure of population increase on the both estate and village has been reduced at the time, perhaps controlled through the tail out of renunciation into non-production. For monks, the merit symbolized by this renunciation and resulting from his family or family choices takes the form of increased welfare for his kin in the village, and by increasing personal merit and charisma and status attributed to his role, apart from the material support from the sponsor additional to his family, he acquires opportunity for scholarship and advancement within the monastic system. Broadly speaking, the more extensive the renunciation, the greater charisma and the lower actual cost on the family. And the monasteries are sponsored by the village laity in accordance with the widespread value system related the Tibetan Buddhist ideology of merit to ecological circumstances. The value of the people produce a socio-economic balance through the highly flexible system whereby member of the agriculture worker and renunciant is related to family needs on estates of different size. The interdependence of laity monastery is made very clear when their economic relationship is examined. Whatever the practice and ideological value that the monastery may have for its sponsor is certainly well maintained by them. It is not a social structure separate from the local community. The monk remains in many ways a villager, and his relatives support him in providing them with merit-making opportunity that play so vital a role in their moral orientation to each other and natural world. Now the impact of the globalization. Zanskar village culturally evidently retains today many features of the ancient Tibetan Buddhist life, although by globalization and modernization, culture and value system of Zanskar is very affected in 10 last decades, and the social life of this valley has responded to modernization, and Zanskar is showing visibly the process of at work in changing the socio-economic structure. Zanskar at the present is caught in the theories of transition to modern life from tradition system to evolve over the centuries in adaptation to harsh natural environment until the last decade, and Zanskar had remained a comparatively isolated areas almost untouched by the individual technology because of its remote mountainous characteristics limiting the mobility, because until 1974 it has been restricted area closed to all outsider civilians without a permit because of the strategic location. The Indo-Chinese conflict of 1962 and 1974, Zanskar with some other parts of Ladakh was open to tourism with its worldwide system of linkages. Since then, the pace of the change has been considerably both in the types of change in extent of their assimilation into socio-economic millennia. With passage of time, globalization and impact of tourism has caused large-scale uphills in the socio-economic system. This led to change from an economic involving tradition better to the growing diversification and monetization. It has led to the changing social values and entrepreneurial scope to younger generation. By the large Zanskar economy used to be characterized by self-sufficient large communities where the major occupation was agriculture, livestock, rearing. Almost all the population is directly dependent on their land, animal for sustenance. Monasteries form very vital part of the socio-economic structure. Besides their religious role, they serve as a market center during the fairs and festivals and as meeting places for ladies living in the adjacent valley or as part apart. These traders comes with their were all the way from Leh, Kargil and other parts of the region, Manali even also the nearing state, by horse, caravans or by trucks and train to stop in the large monastery villages. With the advent of tourism and employment of the local population in government administrative posts, the diffusion of cash capital has increased, and with infusion of industrial commodities, a new stardom of an economic better off upper class is emerging from the traditional society and becoming means and self-centered materialistic laities. Before 1961, monasteries were the only source of education, primarily of religious instruction. Now, many families prefer to send their son to the government as well as the corporate schools or the private schools instead of the monastery. Likewise, the social custom of sending at least one son into the monastic order was based at least in the part of the economic consideration. Nowadays, many of the second or the third son prefers to join the Indian Army or some other tourist-related jobs or leave Zanskar in search of a better life on the urban centers of Ladakh. In economic terms, the monastic population is more or less unproductivity. Before 1974, most of these monasteries were kept open and there was nothing charged to the tourist pilgrimage ladies. But introducing of tourism has changed the monastery charge with fee to visit the chapel. Today, the unfortunate leverage takers will not be made or so welcome, will be charged high price and risk the theft of belongingness. The feeling of inferiority and pressure to modernize has led a strong rejection of the Zanskari culture and loss of cultural identity among many Zanskaris. This new influence has contributed in many ways to degradations of fragile environment of Zanskar and breakdown of the traditional village, family, monastery life, as well as ethnic conflict between Buddhists and Muslims sometimes. Taking into account the above factor, it seems that the traditional Zanskari society and their sustainable lifestyles are in danger of disappearing due to the great deal of exposure to contemporary Western ways. Now in days Ladakh, I have been witnessing that every monasteries are becoming independent rather than interdependent in it used to be. All the major monasteries have commercial complexes, guest house, museums, or other souvenir shops to sustain themselves rather than on laities. The laities are becoming more and more materialistic and individualistic and aesthetic in terms of religion. One who has faith in the same tradition Buddhist practice these days, they oft merit through going to the monastery, offering things, or lots of ladies have disconnected from the monastery as a sponsor or a chindak. The reason they don't have any child in the monastery as a monk, most of the ladies are changing from joint family to nuclear family and having minimum child, which they do not want to send to their monastery. Even though globalization has took everything into the lab, still the Chindak system of monastery has not been lost totally in the Zanskar region. However, slowly is taking some other shapes and changing in the form of individualism and self-sustaining, and its effective platform for social, economic and security is not built in the Zanskar. Now the future may be by no means a happy one, a happy hardly developed deserted economy with its traditional skills either destroyed or lost. The warning is on the wall. That's the what I would like to give the message, that the warning is on the wall and the edge. It's at the edge of losing the beautiful system which interdependent and sustainability used to have. Now, due to the globalization or technological or 21st century, we can say the AI age, now all these are turning into the monasteries as a deserted, as a monumental part and a piece of in the mountains where one can go and see as a museum or artifacts kind of things. But the livelihood of that monastery has been getting slowly vanished. And then if I go recently, just wanted to show that recently I went from this, this is the Ladakh where we have, and then here where I work in the Arunachal part of the area. So both the instances, this is the whole Himalayan region we can see. I think it's working, no? Not working. So from here, this is the Ladakh and this is the whole Himalayan region. So I work somewhere here, itself, in the Arunachal part. Then both the part, last June I was in my hometown in Ladakh, and in the Hanle, or the last village of this village or towards the Tibet border, where we can say Hanle, where is the astrophysics or astro observatory. So there monastery I asked few questions, as well as in the same question in the Arunachal or the last part of that Himalayan region. So both instances came as a very astonishing for me to see that both the monasteries are getting, like yesterday, one of the Chinduk, the Korean monk, who has said that their monasteries are becoming, the monks are decreasing in number day by day, and then the monasteries, the new monks in recruitment or the new monk initiations are becoming very less and less, and then how to recruit the new monks. So both have the system like that. So in the some of the villages, what they did in Ladakh and then as well as in the Tawang region of the Arunachal Pradesh, both I asked the monks and the villagers both, and they said they have a system right now imposed on the societal or the nearby villages, where the chindak or the sponsors are there. This, if they have one or two children or third children used to be has to be sponsored to the monastery, the third child. If they have 2 children or 3 children, out of 3, the middle one has to go to the monastery, whether it is monk or a nun. If they does not give the monastery to the monastery, even one has a nuclear family, so they impose a fine of, like in Ladakh, I heard about 12 million rupees in Indian rupees, like 12 million. And here in the Tawang, they had another, not much as much as 12 million, but they have almost like 4 to 5 million of rupees toward the monastery as a fine if they does not give sponsors as a child toward us. And then in Ladakh, what I saw, even they are now relaxing the what we call for the donors to get the son into the monastery initiation to become a monk. They have relaxation also. In the Hanle region, they have the Nyingma sect of monastery. So they said that the monk can even get married. He can have a family also. But in the daytime, they have to come to the monastery for rituals and other performance, as well as they can inherit some of the property also. So such kind of relaxations are coming up in these modernizations, and so that they can still sustain that monastery to go ahead like that way. So this is a great challenging phase at the time of this globalizations. Hope, I think, like yesterday, the Chanduk, Venerable Chanduk in the South Korean, who has given talk on the what is they are doing in the South Korea to popularize or getting the young youths into the monasteries. So such kind of, I think, some policies, if our policy makers as well as the monastics can come out with, hopefully it can sustain. Otherwise, within a decade, I think it will just become as an artifacts and just as a museums kind of a monumental kind of things. So thank you very much for giving me this.
Thank you very much for presentation.